All right, there we go. Hello, Dr. Baskin. I hope you're doing well. This presentation is going to be over religion in the Middle Ages, or also known as the 15th century, as we all know it, by yours truly, April Freeman. Now, due to all of the information I, ended up finding for the new question that I previously told you about, I formed everything into a total of 2 points. And my reasoning for that is because I feel like I could have just kept talking, if that makes sense. I just could have kept talking about all the information I found. So I feel like 3 points would have been too much. So I just fit everything into 2 points. And I feel like that really worked better for my presentation. Now, this is my topic question. As I was saying, I changed my question from a very wordy and in my opinion hard question to really narrow down answers to a more broad question. So my topic question reads, what was religion like in the 15th century and how did it affect the people living during that time? Also, I decided to add a picture of what the inside of the Roman Catholic Church looked like. Now, I'm not sure if this is what they looked like back in the 15th century, but this is a image, I believe now. I couldn't find a image from the 15th century, but this was the prettiest picture that I could find. Also, this is from, I believe it's Alamy.com. Bunch of great pictures on there. I believe I used a couple other pictures for my presentation from that website. Now, to answer this question very broadly, I covered what religion people mainly practiced in the 15th century and where they practice it at. And I kind of give you a hint from my picture, the Roman Catholic Church. And then to answer how it affects people, I decided to talk about the education in the 15th century. So those are my two main points. Now, my thesis for this presentation talks about the importance of religion and the various points I planned on covering in my project, which are the points I just talked about, the education and the where they practice and what it was. So this is what my thesis says. In the 15th century, also known as the Middle Ages, religion became an important factor in people's everyday lives. Now, back then, religion was something people used to explain why something did or didn't happen. In the Middle Ages, the majority of the population was religious, which all followed the same beliefs under one big church that came into power in the 15th century. Now, I mean religion was something people used to explain why something did or didn't happen. I mean that as people explained oh, you littered. That's why this bad thing happened to you. That's what I assume people acted like, not necessarily littering, but that's just a very broad example. And we kind of see that in the literature that we read for the 15th century. I believe back in Beowulf when we read that they were praying to God for a safe travel across the ocean, and when they finally arrived at their destination, they, thanked God for them making it safe. Like they said that it was all because of God that they made it back just because they asked him to help them, if that makes sense. So that's why I kind of threw that in there because I genuinely think that that's what people thought back then. Now I'm not all sure because I don't know, I wasn't there, but now we are going to move on to my topics and what I found. So starting with topic number 1, I'm going to be covering the church and its religion. So, from my previous slides, we know that the Roman Catholic Church was the one in charge. Now, after the fall of the Roman Empire, Europe was now under dominant control of the church, and as I just said, that is the Roman Catholic Church. Now, what religion did they all practice? Yeah, they're under Roman Catholic Church, but are they Catholic? Are they anything else? What were they? So this made Christianity become the only reconsidered religion, along with the exception of some Jewish people. I was reading a couple articles, and Christianity was the main religion I saw pop up, but as I continued to read multiple articles, I always saw some Jewish ties in there. So Jewish religion was still around, but it didn't outweigh Christianity. Christianity became the most practiced and popular religion in the 15th century. So I read an article on the Finer Times, and it was by, I believe, a man named Simon Newman, and he talked about all things Christianity in the 15th century. Talks about the reformation of the Roman Empire and the fall and how the Roman Catholic Church came to be. And it was just way too much to put on these slides. So, according to the Finer Times article, Christianity in the Middle Ages dominated the lives of both peasants and the nobility. Now, moving on, one of the popes of the church in the 15th century was Pope Julius II. And of course, there were many popes in the 15th century. But I decided to put Pope Julius II on my presentation because his name also, popped up a bunch of times. So I just figured that he was really big in his time and he did a lot with his power. And technically, the Pope held extreme power and was believed to be God's very own representative on earth. So, kind of like, how we see pastors nowadays. I believe that's how it would be. So, that is Pope Julius II over to the right. And I got that image from historyhit.com. And it's actually interesting. If you go on that website to look up the popes of the 15th century, you can see all of them named right there. But as I said, I decided to put him on there because I saw his name multiple times in my research. All right, moving on to topic number 2. I'm covering how the Middle Ages education system related to the church. So as I said before in my question, I wanted to cover how religion affected people. And when I was doing my research, I came to find that it affected people in education because nobody was really educated. It all came from the church. So the education system of the 15th century was a system that was majority influenced by the church. So that's really how it affected people. If you were a part of the church, then you had the opportunity to be educated. And if you were a peasant or somebody who wasn't a part of the church, you were not educated. You were not able to be educated, which kind of sucks, but that's how it was. And going back to the Finer Times article that I was talking about, this is actually a separate one, but written by the same man, Simon Newman. And he wrote a whole article about the education in the 15th century, education in the Middle Ages. And so, according to the Finer Times article, Simon Newman says basic course of study used to contain Latin language, grammar, logic, rhetoric, philosophy, astrology, music, and mathematics. So you see that all of that stuff is under basic course of study. Basic course of study nowadays is not all of that stuff. You have math, science, language arts, and social studies. That's it. So it's kind of interesting to see that all of their basic course study that the education system offered is all of that stuff put together. People were learning all of that stuff. So, towards the end of the Roman Empire, education seemed to be one of the least important topics, which all changed once the church came into the picture. So, before the 15th century, or leading up to the 15th century, nobody cared about education. Nobody, like, it wasn't something that people really fought for, wasn't important, but that all changed when the church came into the picture and it started to become like a must, I guess you could say. And also, this is really interesting. In the Middle Ages, the bishops of the church were the ones that were educating people in the upper class. So, I mean upper class as in like the people that were a part of the church. Because we know from based on my last couple of slides, the peasants were not a part of the church. So basically lower middle upper class, I guess you could say. And it's really interesting to see because you see it's the bishops acting as the teachers, and they weren't really called teachers, they were bishops. So that's really interesting to me, and it's really interesting to see how that's how it affected people. Like the people of the church were the educated, and that's how they were viewed, and the peasants were just viewed as peasants. So moving on. Oh, wait, going back. This image right here, I decided to look up an image for a classroom in the 15th century, and this illustration is one of the only ones that came up, I believe, and I also found this on the allme.com. And it's just a cute little illustration of a bishop, like, teaching the people in the church. So, that's really interesting. Moving on, and we're at the end of my presentation. This is my works cited. Got all of my sources right here, and you see these two sources right here are the Simon Newman's articles. Those are actually really interesting, and I've really enjoyed reading those. Wow, I cannot talk. But yeah, I hope you enjoy my presentation. Thank you.